And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another YouTube reading guide series. So today is video 05 and it's walking through the Top Cow Artifactiverse, or as some of you may consider it, the Witchblade universe. To create this reading guide, I have read the 902 comic issues that comprise the entire Artifactiverse and more besides, and I've used that knowledge to build the internet's most detailed reading map for this unique corner of modern comics. Now, during the series, I'll be using terms such as volume with a big or small v, or I'll be referring to comic readers that are type P or type J, or I'll be referring to other companies and comic lines in passing. This can all seem a little overwhelming, but if you do need more guidance on what this all means, you check out the introductory video in this series, which is video 00, and that will explain all of these points. The link for that is in the description below. So with no further ado, let's go here. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Artifactiverse of Top Cow arranged in a reading map. Today we're going to be continuing our walk through the Artifactiverse by continuing the section that I've entitled the Origins Era. You can see it here. Please remember this is my own name for this era of the Artifactiverse, as is the name of the Artifactiverse, and not an official title. Okay, let's begin. All right, gang, last time we covered all the Witchblade comics at the top in our first video and the Darkness stuff on the left in that same video. And then in the last video I just put out, we covered all the Tomb Raider stuff and the Fathom stuff on the right, including all the one-shots and the uncollected, okay? So that took us from Witchblade's issue 25 all the way down to 60 with quite a few detours. And this puts us smack bang here in the middle of the uncollected Witchblade era. Unfortunately, before we continue on with this, I know you want to, and we will in this video, we have to move back over here to the Darkness side of the map. Now, what we need to do is we left Jackie Estacado's story here with the story that I call The Death, which is issues 39 to 40, and it ended on a pretty final note there. What we now need to do, and this is important, is we have to read this next. This series was actually called, well, in single issues, it was actually called Universe. When collected, it was actually called Tom Judge The Rapture. It's written by Paul Jenkins, and it's also meant to be kind of like a prelude or a parallel event to the Endgame event that we talked about here, you can see on the right. Don't worry about that. It doesn't really have a bearing on Endgame. I think it was intended to as part of the public history, but that didn't really work out. So this is the trade collection, which is still available, Tom Judge The Rapture, sometimes called Tom Judge End of Days. Now, it's important to read this at this point. There are several reasons it's important. Firstly, it introduces the character of Tom Judge, who becomes quite a major character in the Artifactiverse later, as well as his supporting characters, such as Tilly. It also introduces the Rapture, which is the first new artifact we've seen other than the Darkness, Witchblade, and Angelus. In fact, an iconic moment in issue 3 of the series actually introduces all 13 artifacts, and this one moment really is the birthplace of the idea that would actually become the Top Cow Artifactiverse. But I'm getting ahead of myself. As you can see here, it also has a direct bearing on the fate of Jackie Estacado directly after the events of issue 40, and in fact, it's essential reading before we carry on with Jackie's tale, which we're going to do in just a second. So you need to read Universe, that's what it's called in single issues, and it's an 8-issue series with a final 9th issue that's just called Tom Judge End of Days. God knows why they called this trade paperback collection Tom Judge Rapture, but they did. As you can tell from the fact my online name is the same as the main character, I love this series. However, it does end pretty abruptly, and you might find it a little unfulfilling and lacking in closure when you read it, so consider yourself warned. Now, this series actually had a short-lived spin-off series called Inferno Hellbound, which you can see here. I've got a little dotted arrow to it because it is definitely non-essential reading. So Inferno, as it was subtitled Hellbound, lasted for 3 issues. They actually had an issue 0 as well, but that was set after issue 3. But it was so terribly cliched, it got cancelled after that. I mean, it was meant to be an ongoing series, but it was just, oh God, it was just god awful. It was about a team of soldiers sent into hell led by a man called John Dante. This was so unoriginal, even as a teenager reading it, I was aware this was lazy writing. As you can see, it was left uncollected and largely unforgotten. Okay, so we're through Universe and Inferno, so what we now need to do is dive back into the Darkness. Now, this next bit was a bit tricky to put together, to be honest. Not because it was confusing, but simply because I couldn't work out which of these issues, if any, were available as trade paperback collections. I think I found pictures of some online that use the subtitle Darkness Resurrected, but I was never confident these are genuine collected issues that you could actually physically go out and buy, and they don't appear to be listed on Comixology. So as such, I gave up, I'll be honest, and I've arranged them by story arc here, and I've given each arc my own title. Um, as well as that, just before we look through these dotted circles here, I just want to point out something else which is a little bit awkward and confusing. The numbers on the physical single issues, if you track them down physically, are from 1 to 24. However, if you buy them digitally, the numbers in the corners are from 41 to 64. Either way, the next time we meet Jackie after this, in video 7, the official numbering, even on the single issues you can buy physically, is back to issue 65 onwards. I know this is confusing, it's pretty weird, even to me. All the Issue of the Darkness count as one big volume of a big V. There's like 116 of them in total. Because in the whole Artifactiverse, it's just one continuous run. But for a while, this little stretch here has the numbers reset. But only for a little while, and then Top Cow changed their mind. It's random and it's annoying. I've tried to explain it as best as I can, and it can be confusing if you're buying it digitally and then buying it physically as well. But if you're confused, just rewind the video 60 seconds and listen to me again. Okay, so let's go into it. After you read The Universe and Thomas Judge The Rapture, you should then read what I call The Return, which is Darkness issues 1 to 4, or rather issues 41 to 44, and then the Prelude issue 0.5 that has this wicked J. Lee cover that I love. The next arc you need to read, which I'm showing here, collects issues 45 to 48, or 5 to 8. Next is an arc that I like to call Dragons in Darkness, which collects issues 49 to 53. After that, you really want to read a one-shot, which is called Most Wanted. Next is the Streets Run Red arc, collecting issues 54 to 56. And next is an arc called Hell House, which collects issues 57 to 60. The final arc is something I like to call All in the Family, and it collects issues 61 to 64. Remember, if you're buying these as physical single issues, keep an eye out for all the renumbering nonsense. For example, that last issue with the issues that are technically 61 to 64 will actually be marked as issues 21 to 24 on the physical issues. Finally, I would personally recommend that you then finish this off by reading the Four Horsemen 4-issue miniseries because it fits in well here. Now, I know that line continues on. Don't worry, we will catch up with that in a later video because at this point, that line then moves on to what I'm going to call the Artifacts era. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached the end of the Darkness section of the Origins era. Now, before we finish up today, I did promise you we'd finish up with Witchblade, and we are going to do that here. Okay, so remember, these issues are still as yet uncollected, hence the dotted circles around them. Now, the first post-Endgame Witchblade story arc is one that I like to call Magdalena. It collects issues 62 to 65. Next is an arc I like to call the Road to Death Pool, and that collects issues 66 to 69. This was a desperate attempt to draw up interest in the series after the commercial failure of Endgame. Note the one-shot Witchblade Nottingham is set just before issue 66. Next, we have an arc which is issue 70 to 75. This is called, or I call it, the Death Pool arc. Now, this desperate attempt failed here, basically. It was an attempt, Road to Death Pool, Death Pool. They were trying to drum up sales. It was no good, and it's not a very good storyline. By the way, this, whilst it's called Death Pool and Road to Death Pool, this has nothing to do with Deadpool, the Marvel character. Don't get confused. And that then takes us to the very last uncollected Witchblade issues, an arc I call The Death of Tom Judge, and that collects issues 76 to 79. Don't worry, the title I've given it is not a spoiler really, for reasons that are obvious when you read the issues themselves. There are two things to remember on this though. This won't make any sense unless you've read Universe, as otherwise you'll have no idea who Tom Judge is, and you really need to find that out relatively soon. The second thing, and this was really annoying, these issues introduce a random character who is then never seen again. This is referred to in the issues cryptically as being a cameo from the short-lived 5-issue Humankind series. which you can see here is an uncollected dotted purple circle. Now, Humankind was a short series written and drawn by Tony Daniel, who you might know from his work at DC over the last decade. He started out in the 90s, and this weird sci-fi space story is even odder than Weapon Zero was back in the Before the Rise era of videos I just did. Now, I read Humankind twice to try to find the connection with Witchblade. All I discovered is that it's a rubbish comic with nothing to do with Witchblade. Please don't try to find it to specifically explain these issues, as it won't. Sorry. So, that's the end of Witchblade for the Origins era. What I will point out is that both the death of Tom Judge and also the Rapture, and in fact the Magdalena too, are tangentially part of the Tomb Raider issues 46 to 48 here, which we mentioned when we talked about the uncollected Tomb Raider issues. If you drifted off from reading these issues after the mess that was Endgame, now's your chance to get back in. And that's the end of today's video, ladies and gentlemen. The next video is the end of the Origins era, where we just finish off the last few bits and pieces in full. As always, this map is available on my website for you to download free of charge, and if you want to download it or print it out to follow along, please do so. It covers 902 issues, so it's probably going to help. As always, please like, comment, and subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter if you can, where I tend to post a one-tweet daily review of whatever I've read that day. Given that I read on average around half a dozen comic issues a day, it's a great way to see what I'm up to and to get an idea for what future videos are in the pipeline. If you'd like to support the channel, please do. It's easy, just head over to Amazon and pick up the first volume of my prose superhero novel, No Gods or Kings, the story about a world like our own, but where superhumans are a reality, and how the world then changes into something very, very different as a result. It's planned as a series of 9 novels, the first 4 are already out. They cost less than $1 each, they're free for your Kindle Unlimited, and it'd mean a huge amount to me if you were to leave a review of it as well. If you'd like to read a free excerpt of the first book, that can be found on the same website as this reading map, which is nogodsorkings.com. The link is in the description below. Until next time, everyone, stay classy.